In 1969, the World Trade Center's North Tower began its climb into the New York skyline. The red cranes seen at the top were Australian-designed kangaroo cranes, which essentially built the tower up around themselves. The Porsche factory in the 1970s shows the final assembly line for the classic 911. Nearly every step was done by hand, a stark contrast to the robotic assembly lines that would dominate the industry years later. A stroll through Harlem in 1972 showcases the bold street fashion of the era. The style was heavily influenced by the new wave of blaxploitation films, which were at the peak of their popularity. Rudyard Kipling, author of The Jungle Book, stands in his study in the early 1900s. He was the first English-language writer to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature, accepting the award in 1907. Backstage during the filming of 1953's How to Marry a Millionaire, Marilyn Monroe shares a mirror with co-stars Betty Grable and Lauren Bacall. The studio heavily promoted the rivalry between the three famous blondes to sell tickets. Hollywood star Grace Kelly left her successful acting career to marry Prince Rainier III of Monaco. Her family had to pay a reported $2 million dowry for the wedding, the equivalent of over $20 million today. The day after the attack on Pearl Harbor, recruiting stations across America were flooded with volunteers. These young men are signing up for the Army Air Corps, ready to join the fight. New immigrants at Ellis Island undergo a health inspection around 1920. Doctors had only seconds to check each person for signs of contagious diseases, especially the eye infection trachoma, which meant immediate deportation. Audrey Hepburn walks through a market, likely in Morocco during the 1960s. Even when trying to go incognito, her distinctive posture and style made her stand out from the crowd. A London bobby judges an elegant ankle competition in the 1930s. At a time when showing a full leg was still considered improper, contests like this were a quirky and popular form of public amusement. Two women in Tokyo in 1941 hold a picture of Winston Churchill, jokingly referencing his initials. In both Britain and Japan, WC was common slang for a water closet or toilet. King George V of Great Britain stands next to his first cousin, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, in 1913. Their striking resemblance was so strong that even close relatives would sometimes confuse the two monarchs. President Richard Nixon shakes hands with Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev during the 1972 Moscow summit. This meeting resulted in the Saltwood Treaty, a landmark agreement to limit the production of nuclear weapons. Frank Sinatra studies a script on a beach in Hawaii while filming From Here to Eternity in 1953. His performance in that movie earned him an Academy Award and revitalized his entire career. Refrigerator rail cars sit in a Chicago rail yard in 1942, a critical hub for the American war effort. These yards operated 24/7, moving troops and supplies to both coasts. Diners at the windows on the World Restaurant enjoyed a view from over 1,300 feet atop the World Trade Center's North Tower. For years, it held the title of the highest-grossing restaurant in the United States. Actress Tanya Roberts appears here as Kiri in the 1982 fantasy film The Beastmaster. The movie became a cult classic, gaining a huge following from frequent showings on cable TV channels like HBO and TBS throughout the 80s. In the 1950s, this experimental bubble-top lawnmower promised a futuristic, air-conditioned cut. The concept never went into mass production, remaining a curious relic of mid-century optimism. In 1987, engineers in Romania split this 7,600-ton apartment building and moved it 180 feet. The entire operation was done to make way for a new boulevard, and residents were able to leave their belongings inside. Sydney's Harbour Bridge is seen here shortly after its opening in 1932. The modern view shows the addition of the famous Opera House, which wouldn't be completed for another 41 years. A young Robert Downey Jr. and Anthony Michael Hall are seen with Uma Thurman on the set of the 1988 comedy Johnny Be Good. This was one of Thurman's very first film roles, years before she became a household name. This 1984 portrait shows Whoopi Goldberg just before her breakout role in The Color Purple. At the time, she was primarily known for her one-woman off-Broadway show, where she played multiple notable characters. Winston Churchill takes a walk on a beach in the 1920s. He was a firm believer in swimming for exercise, often braving the cold waters of the English Channel well into his later years. An early version of the Michelin Man mascot, whose name is Bibendum, makes a public appearance around 1910. The character was made of white tires because early rubber products were naturally light-colored before carbon black was added for durability. Young people gather at a disco club in East Germany during the 1970s. Blue jeans and Western music were popular forms of expression that subtly pushed against the strict rules of the socialist state. John Lennon and Yoko Ono's "War is Over" billboard appeared in Times Square during Christmas of 1969. The same signs went up simultaneously in 11 other major cities around the world as a message against the Vietnam War. A portrait of Mick Jagger from the early 1960s shows the singer before the Rolling Stones hit it big. At the time this was taken, he was still a student at the London School of Economics. Actress Sharon Tate relaxes on a beach in the mid-1960s. Shortly before her passing, she had received a Golden Globe nomination for her role in the 1967 film Valley of the Dolls. Nelson Mandela is photographed here in traditional Xhosa attire in 1961. This picture was taken during a brief period when he was underground, organizing against the apartheid government before his arrest. Linda Carter makes a face on the set of the Wonder Woman TV series in the 1970s. The show's famous transformation spin was actually Carter's own idea, which she suggested to the producers. A Life magazine photo from 1964 captures the scene inside a supergiant market in Rockville, Maryland. The sheer variety on the shelves illustrates the boom in consumer choice that became a hallmark of American life in the 60s. At a 1985 White House state dinner, First Lady Nancy Reagan and President Reagan look on as Ivana Trump shakes hands with Crown Prince Fahd of Saudi Arabia. Standing just behind her is her husband at the time, future President Donald Trump. Empty shelves in a Soviet grocery store were a common sight during the late 1980s, a period of widespread shortages. For millions, a simple shopping trip often ended with finding little to nothing to buy. Before she became the blonde bombshell Marilyn Monroe, a young Norma Jean Dougherty posed for this beach photo in 1946. Her hair was still its natural reddish-brown, years before the studio-mandated platinum look. A Dairy Queen from the 1970s shows the classic walk-up window service. Notice the small sign in the window advertising the Misty Kiss, a popular slushy drink from that era. Inside the German Rolleiflex factory in 1949, skilled workers meticulously assembled the famous twin-lens reflex cameras by hand. These high-end cameras were prized by professional photographers for their exceptional quality. A 21-year-old Winona Ryder attends the 1992 premiere of Bram Stoker's Dracula with her co-star, Keanu Reeves. The actors have since claimed they might be legally married, as the director used a real Romanian priest for their on-screen wedding scene. Relna Brewer, a professional strongwoman, shows her strength by ripping a phone book in half in 1938. She was a popular performer in the 30s and 40s, known for her impressive physique and feats. Entertainers from a USO show perform for a massive crowd of American GIs in Normandy, France, shortly after the D-Day invasion. These shows provided a much-needed morale boost and a brief distraction from the realities of the front lines. In the late 1800s, climbing the Great Pyramid of Giza was a common activity for Western tourists. Local guides would assist visitors in scrambling up the massive stone blocks, a practice that is now strictly forbidden. Just 3 months after the Cuban Revolution, Vice President Richard Nixon holds an informal meeting with Fidel Castro in Washington, D.C., in April 1959. After the 2-hour discussion, Nixon privately concluded that Castro was naive but a driven leader who needed to be watched. The eccentric zoologist Lord Walter Rothschild drives a carriage pulled by zebras to Buckingham Palace in 1895. He undertook the stunt to prove to the public that zebras could be tamed and trained just like horses. A classroom of student nurses listens intently during a lecture at Roosevelt Hospital in New York City, 19 1938. In that era, nursing schools were often run with almost military-like discipline and structure. Actress Martine Beswick takes a break on the set of the 1965 James Bond film Thunderball. She is one of the few actresses to have appeared in 2 different Bond films, having also played a small role in From Russia with Love. Sean Connery and Brigitte Bardot are seen together on the set of the 1968 Western film Shalako. The movie was filmed in Spain, and it marked one of Connery's first major roles after his initial departure from playing James Bond. Martin Luther King Jr. removes a cross that was burned on his Atlanta front lawn in 1960 as his young son looks on. This act of terror was a common tactic used by the Klan to intimidate activists, but King defiantly cleaned it up himself. In Cuban cigar factories, workers would pool their money to hire a lector or reader, like the man seen here around 1905. The lector would read everything from news to classic novels, educating the workforce and often becoming an influential figure in the community. Inspired by the chopper motorcycle craze of the late 60s, kids in the 70s would customize their bicycles with extremely long forks and high handlebars. This style, seen here in Chicago, was a way to get the easy rider look without needing a driver's license. First-class passengers aboard the Titanic in 1912 could use the ship's state-of-the-art gymnasium, which featured this electric horse machine. The gym had set hours for men and women and was overseen by a physical instructor to guide passengers through their workouts. In the 1930s, the first women hired as flight attendants, then called stewardesses, were required to be registered nurses. Airlines believed that having a nurse on board would help calm the fears of a public that was still very anxious about air travel.